Hello everybody, my name is Nairi, this is Fly Lots of Birds, and this channel is all about adoption, fostering, childhood trauma. Please subscribe if you want to. So today I'm going to talk about neglect. If you look at my last video, that was my whole story of how we came to have the boys, what the situation's like now, and just a potted history of where we're at. And in that video I said, actually I think I'd like to make another video about neglect. So that's what I'm going to do today. So when the boys came into us, they came in for emotional abuse, but very obviously as well severe neglect. So we knew that when they came in that was the situation that we were dealing with as foster carers, and therefore we knew when we adopted them that was the situation. And by the time we adopted them, if you look back at my last video, we'd already had them for 5 or 6 years. So we had them when they were 2 and 3, just about to turn 2 and 3, and we adopted them when they were 7 and 8. So we'd had a long time to work out what was going on. Neglect is one of those things that's really hard to identify what the damage is and what the problems are, and almost like neglect happens over a longer period of time, where it's not one incident, it's several of things not happening. I feel like working out what's happening with your children also takes a long time to work out how that neglect has actually impacted them. I'm just going to go for a few things that I think are quite obvious with our boys, and maybe you'll be able to identify with that, or if you adopt or foster, it will help you. So the first thing to say about neglect is the boys don't necessarily assume that things are going to happen, and so they often question about things. So whereas by now, because they're teenagers, you would think that because we have provided every meal for them and they've never gone without food, and actually we probably go above and beyond, so their cupboards are always stocked, we nearly always cook a full meal every day, and we nearly always sit down as a family and eat that full meal every day. And then lunch times, because they're teenagers, they can help themselves, but often we'll still do that together. You would think by now that they wouldn't ever panic about where the next meal is coming from or whether there's enough food. But the answer to that is no. They will always be aware of whether there's enough food. And sometimes they will always maybe take more than what they need to take. So they're not big eaters. I'll say they're definitely not big eaters. They're very small children. They don't need a lot of food. But if you put several snacks in a cupboard, and you're going to say, oh, every teenager will be like this. I know a lot of teenagers will be like this, but I'm saying it's more significant with the boys. So yes, these behaviours exist with other children, but I'm going to say it's more accentuated with the boys. If you put lots of snacks in the cupboard, then especially with the younger one, but sometimes with the older one, they will overeat that. So they won't be able to sort of have 1 or 2 things a day. They will almost squirrel away stuff. So you'll find extra packets and wrappers in their rooms where they've helped themselves to over and above what they need to have. Okay, so we can't do that. We have to sort of limit where the snacks are and how they get to them, especially for the younger one. And I would also say that, especially in the early days, textures were a massive problem. Because they haven't learnt, again, check my previous video, how to speak properly at a younger age, then this almost caused problems with certain textures they were eating, and I believe the two things are connected. So certain things like mashed potato, or things that are a bit more cleggy, or things that are a bit more dry, and I still find that with my older son, he has problems with textures with food. He doesn't like to admit that sometimes certain meals he doesn't like, and it's not because of the flavour, it's because of the texture. And that's all wrapped up in their development and speech and language and stuff like that. So that's what we noticed as well. Okay, when we first had them, there were just problems with food all around because they weren't used to eating properly. And again, check out my previous video for that. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we've had a massive struggle with, and again, I know other children have this as well. I'm not saying that it's completely isolated to the boys and that it's the worst thing ever. I'm not saying that. But they are not that bothered about their hygiene, and particularly the older one. And when they came to us, they were very poorly kept. Their clothes were ill-fitting, they were dirty, they were obviously neglected in every way. And even now we battle with, it's important that you do this. You need to do this because. I feel like perhaps my younger son's got a better understanding of why, but we still battle with the same things over and over again. So they came to us with, or the older one came to us with completely black teeth. He had a new set of teeth through that were fine. They didn't get affected. So we were so grateful for that. but trying to get him to understand all the way through his childhood and even now to teenage that he needs to look after those teeth, we have a real problem with that. We've shown him over and over again. We've done it for him over and over again, and yet he still doesn't get it, and he still doesn't do it properly, and hence we're already getting problems with the adult teeth. Now, part of that is his developmental levels and his additional needs, but part of it is not understanding the need for it and not really caring about the need for it, okay? And the younger one, again, you have to repeat to him. He gets it a bit more, but we still find the hygiene side as a problem. So, for example, they'll get in the shower every day. They kind of wash their hair every day, but you know deep down they're not washing. And again, we showed them how to do it. We got to the point where they were too old for us to then show them and tell them anymore, and we've got to leave it to them and just remind them, but we're pretty sure it doesn't happen, okay? So hygiene was another one. Neglect for our boys has resulted in huge developmental issues. Now for you that might not happen, but I'm going to say it's common because of lack of stimulation. We know that they weren't played with. We know that they weren't spoken to properly. We know that they were just left to their own devices, and there was no routine. So there was no when we get up, when we go to bed, all of those things were missing. And so we have found with our boys that their development is greatly affected. Now, some of that could be biological. So it could be that in the family history, there are these things that are already a problem, and we'll never know that. But I've already mentioned in my previous video about their speech and language, and that has impacted their learning all the way through their childhood. It's impacted how they communicate with each other, with their peers, with adults. They often don't understand what other people's interactions are back to them, or that they may be saying something that doesn't quite fit with the moment. Sometimes we'll have a bit of a laugh about it, but someone will burst in and go blah 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 blah, blah. And I'm just having a serious conversation with my mum, and I'll say, read the room, and they know what read the room means, but did they think about that before they burst in on the conversation? No, they didn't. And so that neglect has impacted the understanding of the world based on language and communication. The things that you and I get, those nuances especially, the feeling, the vibe. And actually sometimes they will misread an angry face. They'll think someone's not happy with them. They'll think someone's being negative to them, but they've actually misread it that way as well. So it happens both ways. So language and development. And because of language and development, how they then really get on with the world as far as peers and friendships are concerned. Huge issues around that. And I think their peers know. They can tell with my older son that he's behind with his understanding. He's smaller, he's slower of speech, he's slower to interact, to get things, and so therefore we've had lots of bullying for him. With the younger one, he's probably the one who is more of a perpetrator of the bullying, but he does not seem to understand what people need from him, and he doesn't seem to understand sometimes that friends need other friends, not just him. So it's impacted how they interact with their peers and how people then treat them back. So it's another thing around neglect. And so that's just a few things. And nurturing them into the future, into manhood, is going to be really hard, because they have learned sometimes to accept that they don't have to have things happen for them, and they don't want things to happen for them. And in their family home, even though it was years and years ago, sometimes they may have got something to eat, maybe sometimes they didn't. Maybe they got an interaction, but it wouldn't be a positive one. And so they have that trauma, they have that developmental childhood trauma which lives with them, sits with them, and they have to navigate the world based on that, but they also are in the real world, and so therefore they have got, a mountain to climb. So I know that's not necessarily the most positive video, but it's the truth about neglect, and I hope that helps you, and I will see you again on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.